All right, all right. Peace, love, and light, everybody. We are back, Minds Like Minds podcast. I'm your host, RL Mel Pika, and flying solo today, but we got a incredible guest on with us today that I just can't wait for all of you to get to know, as well as myself, and that is Jennifer Moore. She's an author and an empathic mentor. How are you doing, Jennifer?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for having me here, RL. I'm really
Yes.
pleased to be here.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
definitely pleased to have you. This is going to be fun.
it
It's
is. It really is.
for sure, for sure. But we want we want our viewers, listeners to get to know who Jennifer is, but first I want to touch base with you. See how's your 2023 starting out so far?
It has been both really awesome and like there's been a lot of really like hopeful, good light and energy coming in. It feels like there's a shift, and I've heard a lot of people talking about it. And we've had some health challenges with one of our cats. And
Okay.
so there's been sort of like a little bit of like, oh, okay, so we need to adjust this. And obviously, if you're an astrology person, Mercury is going direct tomorrow. And the Mercury retrograde I'm a Capricorn. And so Mercury
Ooh.
was in Capricorn. And so it's been a doozy in terms of just like, error messages on my website and
Right, right. Yeah.
all those fun things. But all in all, this has been just a really light filled, hopeful time, I would say. And
Yeah.
and just really focusing on like getting rid of all the extraneous stuff, getting rid of all of the extra stuff that just takes up a lot of bandwidth and a lot of mental and emotional space, but really just has me kind of spinning my wheels. So I just had this amazing meeting right before you and I jumped on together with my assistant, and assistant Lisa, where we just ran through the entire calendar of for the whole year and like looked at strategies, but also thought about like, okay, so if you want this to happen, then you have to be thinking about this like this far out and all of
Right.
the other things that go into it. So I don't know about you, but like I'm a Capricorn with Virgo rising. So planning is
Okay.
something I kind of love to do.
Yeah.
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 But I'm also neurospicy. So I can have really great ideas about what I want to plan and how I'm going to do it. And then the day comes and it's like, you said you were going to work on that email or you said you were going to work on that thing. And by the time it shows up, I'm like, no, I don't want to do it. So
Right,
yeah,
right. No, I hear you. I wish
yeah.
I wish I had some Virgo in my life. Like
Mm.
I'm a Libra.
Ah,
And I'm just, a little bit here, a little bit there, have an idea, want to execute. Sometimes I'm in execution mode, sometimes I'm in laid back mode. So I got that internal battle constantly going on.
constantly. My
Yeah.
my brother, my baby brother is a Libra, so I know your pain.
For sure.
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah.
Yeah, but this Mercury retrograde's been a bitch.
It's been a bit of a doozy. I
Yeah.
mean, I've heard so many people talking about how much this Mercury retrograde just really kind of handed their butt to them. For me, I actually really like Mercury retrogrades because what I find Mercury retrograde always does is it brings all the stuff up to the surface that
Mm,
needs to be revealed and that needs to be adjusted, that needs to be corrected, that needs to be dealt with.
right.
And my even with our cat, the issue we brought him into the vet in the first place was ended up being a blessing, because if we had not discovered, like, he was having some urinary stuff, which is very common with male cats,
Right.
but if we had not looked, if that had not been a problem, we would not have discovered that he has an underlying condition that really needed treatment. And if we had not treated it, like, things could have gone horribly sideways. So it's that kind of
Mm,
thing where it's like you end up getting information that you would not have gotten if something didn't break down. And that's one of the things about Mercury retrograde is a lot of times something looks like, oh my God, it's falling apart. But what it's really doing is it's showing you where you need to course correct. And that's one of the
sure.
things I love about Mercury retrograde.
Oh yeah.
Not
Yeah.
necessarily in the moment when everything's falling
No,
apart,
no.
But in hindsight or in the long run, I'm always like, oh yeah, that's why I had to go through that. That's
Yeah.
what that
It's
was
like that
about.
self-reflection and shit, even that shadow work. You don't want to see it sometimes, but hey, it's
But
here
hey,
for a
there it
reason.
is.
It needs to be
Exactly.
worked on, right?
Exactly.
For
Yeah.
sure. For sure. For sure. Well, I mean, with you, like to this point where you are in your life and your career, like kind of give us the trailer, the official trailer of the Jennifer Moore life. Like, how did you get to this point in your life?
Let's say for one thing, it's been a long, twisty, convoluted path. And there have been a
Right.
lot of places and a lot of walls where it's like I walk forward, I hit a wall, and I have to decide if I'm going to turn left or right, or just kind of, or like try to like dig my way out of it or something like that. I've been an artist and a creative and intuitive my entire life. I've also been an empath my entire life. And before we go into just talking about being an empath, let me just define that, because right now, empath is the new black. It's become the trendy word. Everybody's talking
Very.
about it, I'm
Yep.
an empath. And so I just want to be sure that we're on the same page and that your listeners and your viewers understand what I mean. So for me, an empath is a being, doesn't have to be a human, but is a being who is picking up the thoughts, the feelings, the energy, and the sensation from the world around them. And unlike somebody who just may have sort of extrasensory perception, like a medium or a psychic or an intuitive, empaths process the information as if it's our own. And so, like where a psychic or an intuitive might walk into a room after somebody had had a conflict or a fight, and they would be like, wow, it feels like there's a lot of anger and a lot of tension and a lot of intensity in the room here. The empath is like, oh my God, why do I feel so angry all of a sudden?
Right.
And the thing is that often, as highly sensitive empathic people, we grow up in families where people were denying their feelings. And so one of the things, like in the years, I also have a podcast called the Empathic Mastery Show. And so I've interviewed a lot of empaths, and I've
Yeah.
also worked with a ton of empaths over the course of many, actually at this point, decades. And what I have found is that almost everybody has the same story, that as children, we were told, you're being too sensitive, you're overreacting, you're taking it too personally, stop worrying about it, stop, like you're making shit up, that's not really happening. And I have run into one person so far in my travels who did not have that experience as a child, but had a family where they were actually validated for having their feelings.
Oh, wow. Nice.
But most of us experience some level of, you're making it up, you're taking it too personally, basically suck it up, buttercup, and get over it.
Right.
And so the challenge with this is that for many of us, we start internalizing the idea that there's something wrong with us, that we are broken, that we are too sensitive, that we are overreacting, that we are making stuff up, and that maybe like what we're sensing is not really happening. And talk about gaslighting, because we're usually like the canary in the coal mine who's feeling all the things. But at the same time, often we're around people who are not necessarily willing to own it. And so, many of us, and certainly in my case, I started thinking there was something wrong with me, that I needed to find a way to be a different person, that I needed to kind of, like adjust it. And being female and growing up, especially in, like, I was born in the early 60s. I kind of became a teenager in the late 70s, and I became a young adult in the 80s. Um, Weight and body image, and like, like the way, like focusing on, if only I was thinner, then
Right.
everything would be fine. And so I both started to self-soothe by turning to sugar as a way to try to manage this sensitivity, which the irony is sugar is one of the worst things you can use to try to manage sensitivity, because
Right.
it exacerbates sensitivity. It really enhances and amplifies all of that emotional intensity. So on one hand, I was turning to sugar for comfort, but at the other side of it, I was also just like beating the ever living, can I swear?
Of course. Please.
I was
I
beating the
encourage
ever
it.
living, okay. I was beating the ever living crap out of myself about not being good enough, not being thin enough, not being this, not being that. And so, in many ways, my journey is that I was seeking solutions, but they were really unhealthy, dysfunctional solutions that were not working right.
Right.
And that basically led me to hit bottom. That led me to being in one dysfunctional, bad relationship after another. And also, just really powerless over sugar and
Mm.
unable to stop. And but the thing is, when you look at those things and you're like, oh my God, I've really hit bottom and I need to do something different, that's only the very beginning of the journey. And
Right.
what's amazing is when you decide to put down, so I quit smoking first and then gained 40 pounds pretty much immediately. Within like 3 months, I gained
Wow.
40
Yeah.
pounds when I quit smoking. And that was what led me into, I needed to deal with the underlying issues of an eating disorder, body image stuff, and a lot of like depression, anxiety, fear, self-loathing, low self-esteem. And so, as I basically put down the cigarettes and put down the sugar, what happened for me was that I discovered that there was a lot more under the surface that needed to be addressed.
Mm.
And that is a long story that I won't go into. But what I will say is that I became willing to do my work. And as I became willing to do my work, and I also got more and more clear, because when I stopped consuming sugar and stopped beating the crap out of myself, my intuitive abilities, my psychic abilities, as well as my empathic sensitivity, all sort of amplified and increased. And so I started by doing the work for myself. But as I started to experience relief and as I started to find answers that were working for me and feeling better and
Mm-hmm.
more joy and more delight and more wonder about being in the world, that led me to, as I found solutions, I wanted to share them with other people. And so by the time I was in my mid 20s, I was starting to train to be a healer. I was starting to study other modalities. I was actually working as an intuitive and reading tarot cards for people. And what happened was that where I originally started with kind of the delight of fortune telling and kind of being like, what's going to happen to you? As
Yeah.
I kept working with people more and more, what I started to get really curious about was not what will happen to you, but more, what do you want to happen to you? What do you want your life to look like? But especially, what is it about? Like, why are you continuing to choose self-sabotage? Why are you continuing to be attracted to these situations and relationships that are not serving you? And so instead of, there's this woman, Thalassa, who is an tarot person in the tarot world. And she said the best thing, like, this is like, I heard this like maybe 30 years ago from her, but she basically said, it's like the old school fortune teller is always saying, oh, you're going to meet a tall, dark cesspool and fall in. And I really got curious about, like, why are we attracted to tall, dark cesspools? Why am I continuously meeting these tall, dark cesspools? And why am I continuing to fall into them? And so my whole perspective shifted from what will happen to you, what will happen to me, that kind of fatalistic, like, I don't have control over this, to really looking at everything as this is about the choices that I'm making and getting really clear about what's going on underneath the hood that's making me tick and is making me make choices that may not really be serving me that well. So what happened for me was that from that sort of looking at life from sort of, as a psychic, but sort of a little bit fatalistic, shifting to choice and, really being about self-actualization and empowerment, that led me to realize that talking about our choices, looking at our choices is not enough. We have to heal the stuff that is causing us to backpedal, that is causing us to get triggered, that is setting us up. And that has been a many decade journey of learning a number of modalities and tools that have made a difference in my life that then I wanted to share with other people. And so over time, as I've come to understand, for example, the profound impact of what it means to be a highly sensitive empath in the world and how that affects every other aspect of our life, as I started to find more and more relief, I started wanting to share that with other people, which eventually turned into the book Empathic Mastery, which the
Right.
subtitle is how to go from an emotional hot or go, like a 5-step system to go from emotional hot mess to thriving success. And so this has really been like just like it's my life's work, it's my passion, it's my mission, it's my joy to share tools that have made a huge difference for me, and have made a huge difference for my clients, so that people don't have to be spinning their wheels. They don't have to be struggling and taking on all the thoughts, feelings, energy, sensations, and suffering from the world around them. Because right now, with everything that's going on in the world, with all of the craziness politically, climate wise, socially, like all the things that are happening, it's really easy, especially for people who are highly sensitive, to get really overwhelmed and to just sometimes start to feel like they're just drowning in the emotional and empathic soup, because there's a lot going on right now. So the book came out, on October 1st of 2019. And then we all know what happened by March of 2020.
Right.
Everything changed. So, I'm just so grateful that I listened to that inner guidance within me that was telling me to write the book, and that I followed just like I followed my intuition. And that I also, as somebody who does have, like, sometimes follow through can be a bit challenging, that I had the follow through, that I had the willingness to just keep putting my butt in the seat, showing up and sitting down and writing and sitting down and doing the things. So that was more than a trailer. That
But
was more
no, it was
like,
great though.
yeah, that was more like a novella, but
You're right, right. Yeah,
yeah,
no, that was great because
awesome.
you led us down a path of, kind of seeing exactly who you are. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And so many things were popping in my head while you were speaking. And I'm a listener. That's
awesome.
that's one thing I do. So I absorb all the information, I let it input, I calculate, and then we can talk. Um,
Excellent.
There's a couple of things you said in there though that were very interesting, and one of them that really sticks out was kind of looking at the intuitive and psychic and metaphysical process different than like your average reader. Like you said, your average reader is going to tell you. It's basically going to give you the information instead of diving deep into, okay, why is this person continually doing these things?
Right.
And the way it correlates with me, because I'm a philosopher when it comes to health and wellness. So like terrain model, I'm a raw fruitarian. You know what I mean? So like just obviously a different concept of what we're talking about, but there's so many similarities because like when we think of healthcare and we think of diet, we think from a reactive state as opposed to a proactive state. So when you're talking about that, I'm thinking it's the same thing with your body and food. Like,
Yes.
we get a rash and all of a sudden we're looking, okay, what ointment can I put on it so it won't itch anymore? Instead of, well, what caused the fucking rash? You know what I'm
Exactly.
saying?
Exactly. Yeah, I am not currently a raw foodist, and it was but I've gone through periods in my life where I've been eating a raw diet, and it really did a lot for my body until it stopped doing a lot for my body. And unfortunately, for me, the fruit actually, because I have a slow metabolism. I'm naturally, and I'm also like a recovering from Lyme disease and, some like chronic fatiguey kind of things in my world. what ended up happening was when I was eating too much fruit sugar for my body because I wasn't moving fast enough and burning it off fast enough, I actually ended up developing insulin resistance from the fructose in fruit. And so I went through a period where after a while I had to eliminate all fruit from my diet, which being a fruitarian, that would be absolute nightmare. And
Right.
so I just, what I found, so one of the things I had to discover was having the willingness to really listen to what is the truth for my body in the moment and not follow the dogma of any one thing, but really looking at how do I continuously find my way back to balance with my body. And and I think that goes back to what you were talking about, like, instead of looking at it as like, oh, I have a rash, I need to take a pill. It's like, if I have a rash, what's out of balance with my body and how can I bring myself back into equilibrium with it? And even with going back to the metaphor of, or thinking about that correlation with psychic stuff and with getting readings, it's like, again, instead of it being sort of that, here's the pill, here's the solution, looking at like, okay, so what's working in my life or what's working in your life, what's not working in your life right now, and what's, like, and what would balance look like instead? And what are the things that maybe we need to be willing to sacrifice, that maybe we need to be willing to shift or change in order to actually make this work?
Yep.
And one of my first journeys into, because food as medicine has been a very big part of my path since I was in my really since I probably started my first diet at the age of 14, but especially like really from the age of 23 on, food as medicine has been a very big part of my story as well. And, and having, there was this burrito company years ago that I got at a food co-op, like when I was in my 20s, but that it said something, it had this, like, it always had like a little fortune on the bottom of the label. And it said, what would you need to give up in order for your life to work? And that, like, I cut it out. It was like teeny, teeny, tiny. I wouldn't even be able to read it anymore because it was like in like 6 point, if that, or maybe 4 point, like it was tiny little letters. But that question, what would you need to get? What would you need to sacrifice? What would you need to surrender? What would you need to give up in order for your life to work? And, I really see that as one of the questions that is just such an important thing to ask, is like, what am I holding on to that is no longer serving me? What am I doing that is not feeding my soul? What am I doing because I'm caught up in my ego, or I'm caught up in rigidity, or I'm caught up in, like, I'm just caught in a place where, like, I'm just holding on. I'm like white knuckling it, but really, what can I surrender? How can I surrender?
Yeah. It's like that Hippocrates quote, you can't heal in the same environment that got you sick.
Ding,
Right.
ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, I cannot tell you how many times where, especially in this last couple years, like working with people, and I have a number of mentees and students, and like where their entire life has been turned upside down by the pandemic. Things like suddenly now they're homeschooling their children, where they had 40 hours a week to be working and doing their thing and working on their business. Suddenly they've got a child in their world 24/7.
Right.
And it's kind of like, you can't expect everything to change if you are in an environment that prohibits that from changing. And it's like, I always think of it like, Hippocrates saying we can't heal in the environment that made us sick. I think about it also like a burn. It's like, you cannot heal a burn if you're still in if you're still in the burning building. Like, we've got to get out of the burning building in order for us to be able to start the healing process. And, I think that's kind of the paradox, or the irony, is I think so often we want to heal, but we're not necessarily willing to leave the burning building. Like, we'd like to heal, but also be able to keep on like lighting the fires.
Yeah. And plus,
Yeah.
look, we also live in a microwave society. So like
We
everybody
do.
wants things like this. They want
Yes.
results. And that's the beauty. I shouldn't say the beauty, the bittersweet aspect of medicine and things like that, to where, oh, I could take a pill and do this, or I can take a pill and lose weight. I can go get liposuction, I can go get plastic surgery, real quick, instant. I get what I want, instant gratification. But when we're talking about healing, like that's a process.
It is a process, not a pill.
No, it is a process, and it's not always a pretty process.
Exactly. Exactly. So, and it's also not a fast process,
right.
I mean, especially like if you're in the world of the internet, and like looking at some of these people, like you'll find these like, slick marketing people who are like, give me like, come work with me in 3 sessions and the 30 years of psychotherapy you've done, or the X number of all this stuff. I can, with my three sessions using my special proprietary formula, your life will be completely transformed. And while maybe that is true for some people, maybe part of it is that people have been doing the work for such a long time that when this person comes along, all it takes is that little bit of leverage to finally bring about the change. But I also have seen that expectation of like, oh my God, all I need is 3, hypnosis sessions, or 3 energy healing sessions, or this or that, and it's all going to be better. That when it doesn't work that way, then people feel like, what's wrong with me? Why is this not working that way? Why am I not better right now? When the truth is that it takes what it takes. And, I mean, in my opinion, like, it is not just even this lifetime that we're talking about. We're talking about multiple lives, and we're talking about a timeline and a trajectory that's about a learning process and a growth process. And I was talking with leaving a message for a friend earlier today who's been struggling with a lot of real physical back pain, and they've changed their diet, they've eliminated mold from their life, they've been on they've actually had to go on antibiotics because they tested positive for an acute Lyme infection, and just all kinds of things like. But they've done, they've gone to the drip bars for like extra B vitamins, and they've done infrared saunas, and you name it, they've been doing these things, and they're still experiencing this excruciating pain. And I was saying to them, because I'm an EFT practitioner, I'm actually a master trainer for EFT International. And EFT, in case you don't know, stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques. And it's kind of, it's basically using tapping to focus on issues and allow them to shift and clear. The easiest way to say it, it's kind of like acupuncture without emotional and mental acupuncture without the needles. But anyway, I was saying to them that, it's like, even if we can move the needle a little bit, like even if we can take that pain from a 10 down to a 7, if we're moving the needle even that little tiny bit, that's progress. And, so often people are in that microwave society, in that pill society, where it's kind of the idea of, well, if I don't go from a 10 to a 0, something is wrong. And yet what I have found again and again and again, as especially working with EFT, is that you do not go from a 10 to a 0. You go from a 10 to a 7. You go from the 7 maybe to a 6. Then maybe you go from that 6 to like a 5 or a 4. Then maybe you have a realization and you get down to like a 3 or a 2. But it is a journey and it is a process. And from that maybe 3 or 2, maybe you get to a 1.5. Maybe you get to, and then eventually get to that half point, and eventually get to that 0. And the thing is that, and when I'm talking about 0 to 10, I'm talking about what's called the subjective units of distress, which is also known as the SUDS, which is basically on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being absolutely no feeling whatsoever about it, and 10 being the worst thing you could ever imagine in this life or another. How would you rate this? And, and so when we're talking about like going from that, the worst ever 10 down to the not even registering on the radar anymore, 0, you don't go from 10 to 0. You go incrementally. And even in terms of talking about body and food and weight, again, like it does not, like, going from being, let's say 30% overweight or 50% overweight, or like double what you should be weighing. Somebody should not go from weighing like 250 pounds down to 100, a svelte 130 in the course of
Right.
like 2 months.
Exactly.
Like, that will set off the equilibrium will go out of balance as much, just as much when healing happens too rapidly. Can you tell I'm passionate about this? Like,
Oh,
this
I,
is
I
something,
love
yeah,
it. I love
yeah,
it. And it's so true. It's so true. It's just kind of the way society's conditioned everybody, unfortunately.
yeah.
But the thing is too, like you talked about, we can be carrying it on for lifetimes. Look, the healing never stops. Like,
Never,
it might be
ever.
at different aspects, you know
Right.
what I mean? But it never stops. It doesn't
It
matter. It doesn't matter where you are on your journey. It doesn't matter how many books you've read, how many healings you've done, how much healing you've done for other people. Like, it never stops.
never
Um,
stops.
the continuous thing.
Well, and we have to keep course correcting. It's like every single day we have to wake up and have to. I mean, we get the choice to wake up every single day and decide that we're going to do what we can to be better, to be kinder, to be more loving, to function from a place of love as opposed to a place of fear. But as long as we're in a human body, as long as we are carrying our ancestral legacies and the trauma that has been carried forward for the last 5,000 plus years, like, there's legacies in our system that are all coming home to roost right now. As long as we're alive, we're going to it's like we will wake up, we will feel grief, we will feel anxiousness, we will feel, sorrow, we will feel anger, we will feel fear. Like, it's normal to feel these things. And it means that we're going to constantly have the work is always in front of us, which
For sure.
for me, as I'm a total learning junkie, I'm a total, like, I will spend the rest of my life as a seeker. That's like awesome. Bring it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Has there been anyone on your journey that's been like a mentor to you, or someone that kind
Oh,
of gave you
yeah.
that kick in the ass, or that inspiration to kind of shift course a little bit?
Oh, many people. Absolutely. I mean, one of the very first mentors, actually, one of the very first people who kicked me in the ass was my brother that I was mentioning,
Okay.
the Libra, and
We tend to do
he,
that.
yeah, yep, you guys do. You guys can give, and like, there is nobody in my world who can make me question whether I'm on the right path better than my brother does. And, I just remember when I was much younger and I was like, I had quit smoking and I had already started on the path. But like I said, I had gained 40 pounds very rapidly because I quit smoking and I replaced it with basically eating a lot of food to compensate for the lack of cigarettes, because I didn't understand that I was smoking for a lot of reasons. And so I wasn't dealing with the root cause.
Mm.
And so it just replaced one self-soothing mechanism with another. So when I finally started to be like, okay, I'm willing to deal with this part of it now. My brother, this is definitely a really personal story, but my brother, like, I had gone to a recovery group and I had learned about sugar being a drug, and I was like, okay, I'm willing to stop this. And that day I was like, I came home and I grabbed we had these bright plastic, like tomato red orange plastic cereal bowls. And I grabbed this bright red orange cereal bowl and I grabbed the half gallon of, like brick of chocolate chip ice cream, Breyers for that matter,
Mm.
out of the freezer. And I basically scooped myself like a good, like, cup plus of like chocolate chip ice cream, threw it into the bowl. And I was like, this is my last hurrah. I'm going to have my last thing of sugar. And I walk into the room because at that point I was young enough. I was still living at home and my brother was living at home too. And I walk into the TV room with this big bowl of ice cream. And my brother just gave me this look. He was just like, Jenny, he was like, you are so full of shit. You are so full of it. It's like, you're never going to get this together. And I was so pissed at him. I'm just going to have this last one. And he's just like, and as I heard myself arguing, I realized that everything that I had heard in this recovery group about addiction and about sugar addiction was exactly what I was doing. I was arguing for the sugar. I was arguing for holding on to it. I was justifying it. I was bargaining, and I was making promises that making excuses that I would deal with it the next day. And what I realized in that moment was that if I didn't do something about it right then and there, that I was never going to stop. So I stormed out of the room. I was pissed as hell. And I took the ice cream and I dumped it down the disposal, and I ran the disposal angry. But I felt relief because I knew that I was doing what I had to do. And I knew that I had made the decision to stop hurting myself. And so that was one of the first times where somebody just really kind of redirected me and pointed me in the right direction. What is it? The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next amazing mentor I had was this incredible psychotherapist that I worked with for 7 years, who was just worth her weight in gold, who was very intuitive and very empathic. And so she was the first person who helped me to start discovering that maybe 7 or 8 times out of 10, like 70, 80, sometimes even as much as 85% of the time, I was coming into her office and talking about what I was feeling and how distressed I was. And she was helping me to start putting the pieces together and recognizing that most of the time, why I was feeling so out of sorts was because I had been around somebody else where I picked up their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that was life-changing, because when I started to be able to recognize what was mine and what was not mine, and recognize what I had absorbed from other people, that was a game changer. And that is actually one of the reasons why empathic mastery, it's a 5-step system. The first step in the 5-step system is recognize, because you can't put a ball of light up around something if you're carrying a lot of negativity, if you're already absorbed all the toxicity. Putting a bubble of light around it is kind of like putting gasoline into a pressure cooker. It's only going to make things worse. And that's one of the reasons why sometimes when parents have really highly sensitive empathic kids, and they do just put a ball of light up around it, and the kid comes home and they're like, it was even worse. That's why, because they've already absorbed stuff. And so this therapist this mentor she was psychic, she was intuitive, she was an empath, and she was the first person who really started to help me understand how being this sensitive was affecting me. And I mean, I could go on and on. I am a very strong believer in mentors. I'm a very strong believer in I believe very wholeheartedly, to the point that it's on my website, you can't read the label from the inside of the jar. And so I do not assume that I know what's best. I don't assume that I know what's best for myself. And especially if I'm working through something where I'm dealing with gnarly stuff, I'm dealing with ancestral trauma, I'm dealing with my own trauma and my own triggers, I will defer to somebody who is not in pain, because pain often distorts our perception of reality. And so anytime I see somebody who is like a guru or a leader, and particularly you see some of these on documentaries, I'll not bother going into names about anybody right now, but there are certainly examples of some people who are quite famous, but who have the hubris to suggest that they don't need, I was watching one documentary a little while ago, and this person was they basically perceived themselves as being so spiritually evolved that nobody was qualified to teach them or help them, because nobody was as far along as they were. And God bless this person, they are freaking delusional.
Right.
And they are causing an incredible amount of harm to a lot of people, because they have no mentor. They have no checks and balances. They have no supervision. And, as a master trainer for EFT International, we have the most stringent set of criteria for what qualifies somebody to become a certified accredited EFT practitioner on the entire planet. And we are a nonprofit organization with a board, like we have committees, and we have a board of directors, and we have all kinds of people who define, and who, like, where we check in with each other, and there's checks and balances, but there's also a set of standards to keep people safe, to keep ourselves safe, and also to keep other people safe. And one of the requirements is that you are required to get mentoring, and you're required to get support and supervision annually. Like, you have to do a minimum of 6 hours a year of supervision in order to continue to maintain your license, which 6 hours is nothing.
Right.
But, so I just will say, like, mentors are just like mentors, coaches, teacher, other trainers, people who have gone further than I, like, who have what I want, or who have accomplished some of the things that I'm hoping to accomplish. I will be working with somebody. I mean, I'm sure when I cross over and I'm on the other side, I'll have mentors. Like,
right.
I will never not have a mentor until I dissolve into the oneness of all things, and I have the capacity to be aware of all things all at once. Then
right.
maybe, but then I'll still have a mentor, like, I'll still be in the question. I'll still be in the curiosity.
No, I love that. I mean, I try to surround myself with people that are going to help me grow. Like my team now, I mean, it's a bunch of people that I look at as equals on different aspects of their journey, and they help me grow with their experiences and their expertise and whatnot. I mean, look, at the end of the day, that's what this life is. It's learning. It's education. It is all of our incarnations are education for us to continue to ascend. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And some lives, it looks like we're not making a lot of progress, but we're getting a lot of information. And, with my dad, he crossed over back in 2020. And actually, sadly, he died from COVID. But with my dad, like, this life, for one thing, he fell out of a moving car at the age of 4 and suffered a pretty severe traumatic brain injury that affected him. And especially, frontal lobe brain injury affects your impulse control. It can affect speech, logic, reason, capacity to communicate effectively. And when I look at it, I am blown away by how much he was able to compensate for this. But it did impact certain aspects of his life. And so what's been fascinating is that it always sort of felt like this was sort of like a life, like, where it was almost like by osmosis, he was getting a lot of information, or he was kind of like doing a lot of reconnaissance mission with this life, getting a lot of information. But as soon as he left this mortal coil and he left his body, it became really easy to be in communication with him. And it was kind of like he got so many things that he didn't necessarily get while he was alive. But once he had ascended into pure spirit form, his experiences had really shifted. Now, obviously, when I'm talking about, some people might think that I am completely off my rocker, and that, what I'm talking about, like, oh, yeah, right. Like, okay, lady, you're saying that.
Not our audience.
Okay, great.
Right,
so you guys understand that. Yeah.
All right.
And I will say, having my father die was profound, in the sense that something that I'd never heard before, and I had never realized until he died, is that, and this is something for everybody here in the audience, you guys, when a parent dies, half of your DNA has just crossed over to the other side. You're energetic, and your like, the barrier between you and the veil between the worlds just basically got, like, half of it got eliminated. And so there is something really powerful about when half of your DNA, or God forbid, both parents die at the same time, all of your DNA is over on the other side. There is a way in which your energy system has got to recalibrate in a way that is unlike anything else. And when my dad died, I got downloads and downloads and like it was like my whole energy system was recalibrating, and he like was showing me things and giving me all this information about the way, you know, the universe works.
Mhm.
And I had to recalibrate because suddenly I was the terminal point on the lifeline on my father's line, on my father's timeline, because he was no longer sort of like, you know, like, I don't know, like holding the sandbags from the
The
ocean of
flood. Yeah.
time
Yeah.
coming at me. All of a sudden, like, I'm now the one who is standing there, and I chose not to have children, so I don't have anybody to like throw it all back to.
Mhm.
So I really am like, the buck stops here with the learning, with the energy, with everything. I do have nephews, but it's just not quite the same.
Right.
It's not like they're siphoning off my life lessons and my life force. So I think I actually have a theory that those of us who choose not to have children will often be required to do more life lesson work than the people. I mean, if you have kids, obviously you've got a lot of life lessons to do. You got a lot of work to do. So I'm not saying that like people without kids have to do like are more willing to or doing more work. But there's something about when you don't have kids for the lessons to be passed forward to, where it's kind of like you're either going to get it or that lesson is going to like you're going to have to get it in another lifetime. But it's sort of like, it's up to me. It's up to the person who's like the terminal point on the timeline. So
Interesting.
yeah, but really fascinating. Like, I'm sure your mileage may vary, you know, like as I love to say, you know, the opinions expressed here are strictly those of the person who gives them. Take what you like and leave the rest.
Leave the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you know, on the other hand, I would say that like in your specific situation, like it makes sense that you love being a mentor, you know,
Yes.
because even though you don't have children, you know, the people that listen to you, the people that follow you, the people that come to you are in essence your children and your legacy, you know,
Well,
because
and
all the light you're sharing with the world.
oh, thank you. Well, and I really identify as, and actually, I chose the identity, or I accepted the identity of fairy godmother. It was actually something that I was given, that for a number of years, people just like kids, adults were like, you're like my fairy godmother. And I would have kids be like, will you be my fairy godmother? So I became a lot of people's fairy godmother. So while I am not the mother of any one individual human, I have been the fairy godmother for many three, you know, one, you know, two-legged and four-legged beings. And I really like, and that's actually something I really believe too, is that there are some of us whose job is to be a mom for the moms. Like, there are some of us whose job is to be like, because we don't have all of our time and energy focused on taking care of the one or two or three or five children, that because we're not doing that, it allows us to give other people relief, to be emotionally available for people, to give them that kind of support. And I love sleep. That's one of the big reasons why I opted not to have kids, is that I need a lot of sleep. And I knew that I would not do well losing sleep for like upwards of 4 or 5 years. And I love, and I also really, I'm an ambivert. It's like, I basically am an introvert who can play an extrovert on TV. I'm really like, but I really thrive with a lot of downtime, a lot of quiet time, a lot of alone time. And so I know for myself that I can pour from a full cup much more effectively by having the space to know when I'm available, when I'm able to be present, and having the boundaries of being like, and this time is for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All
And that
right. That's
means
awesome.
holding, you know, that means holding our boundaries, which I think is, you know, I mean, that's a whole lesson for empaths, is having boundaries, holding
Boundaries
boundaries
are
and
so
respecting
important.
them. So important, so
Yeah.
imperative, so essential, like just so crucial.
Let's jump into your book real quick. First
Yeah,
off, I'm a writer at heart. I'm currently working on a book myself, and
you go.
I want to know like your process, like
Oh,
how did you, when you decided to write a book, what did it look like? And, how long did it take you? And also the ins and outs of the book. We want to hear it
okay.
all.
Okay. So I'll start with the simple part, which is the ins and outs, and then we can go into the meat and potatoes or the juiciness of how to
Right,
write a
right.
book. So basically, Empathic Mastery, 5-step system to go from emotional hot mess to thriving success. And
Love it.
it is a 5-star book review. It's gotten like it has at this point we've got like 124 reviews on Amazon or
Nice,
a ratings, and it's like a 5 point, or 4.9 rating because most people are
nice.
giving it 5 stars. It's also a 3-time um, uh, award winner,
Okay,
including my Biba Award, basically, which
awesome.
won Best Indie Book Award for Empathic Mastery for Personal Transformation.
That is
And so it's
awesome.
been a first place winner in like 2 book award contests, and then it has been a second place winner and honorable mention in another. So at this point, all the the book contests that I entered it into, it's been getting a lot of accolades and acclaim.
Congrats.
Anyway,
That's beautiful.
so it's broken into 2 parts. Part 1 is what's an empath? Why am I this way? What does it mean to be an empath? How is this impacting all aspects of my life? And, and what are the possible, like, what happens when we don't deal with it? And what are the possibilities when we do? And so I really unpack stuff about, like inherited family trauma, about impact of triggers, about the ways that we pick things up, all kinds of stuff. And so that's the first 3 chapters of the book, which is all about basically being an empath and the what's, the hows, what's, and whys of that. The second part of the book, part 2, is the 5-step system to go from emotional hot mess to thriving success. And as I mentioned before, step 1 is recognize. We have to recognize, first off, before we can even recognize what's ours and what's not ours, we have to recognize our identity as an empath. Because so many people and so many of the clients that have come to me and the people that have worked with me, people are like, I think I tend to work with people when they've tried everything, when they've explored all the options, and somebody else is like, I think Jen might be able to help you. Like, it's kind of like, I love a tough nut. And so I get a lot of people who come to me where somebody sent them and they're just like, I think Jen can help you. As a result, a lot of the people show up, and when they first meet me, they don't identify as they might identify as highly sensitive, but not as empaths and not as psychic, not as intuitive. They might know they're somewhat spiritual, but a lot of times they're still trying to find that identity. What I find again and again and again is that they are empaths, and that when they embrace that identity, that's the game changer. So the first step of recognize is embracing our identity. Then we start to recognize that we are feeling out of sorts, that we're feeling wonky, that we're picking up the energy that's going on in the world around us. And then from that, we start recognizing what's mine, what's not mine. And beyond that, we can start working on recognizing, where is this actually coming from? What is this actually about? How is this impacting me? So that chapter is a doozy. Like, it is just loaded with information.
Nice.
Chapter 2 of part 2 is release. And that's all about, how do we let go of the stuff that is no longer serving us? How do we diffuse our own internal triggers and release the inherited and personal trauma and karmic trauma that is keeping us spinning our wheels and stuck, as well as releasing other people's stuff that we've taken on and absorbed. From that, after we go through, the recognize and release, then we can start to protect ourselves. And protect is both. So protect is the third step. And it's both about energetic protection of building up, our filters and shields, developing our, so that we're not absorbing all the negativity, like really building our aura up, because many empaths have really weak energetic filters and shields. Like, we have thinner auras, and a lot of times even like just filled with holes and like very porous, very open. And so that's part of protect, but it's also about the strategic protection, the boundaries of like, I am not going to be looking at like, like you're like batshit cray friend or family member who like is sending you like a drunk drama text at like 11:30 at night. A boundary is to say, I'm not going there. I'm not responding to this. This is not like, I am not going to indulge that behavior. I can respond to it sometime later, but not right now. And so, a lot of empathic protection is not just the energetic, but it's also the strategic of like recognizing what we will do, what we will not do, and not getting into people pleasing, not getting into depleting ourselves and giving things away when we don't have it to give. So that's protect. Then from that is connect, because the universe abhors a vacuum. And in order to not continue to attract the toxicity over and over again, we have to replace it with something positive. And so, in my experience, connecting with awareness of the fact that we are only a small part of something substantially greater. I like to think of myself as we are cells, or all of us as cells in the body of this earth. And, and the earth is a cell in the body of this solar system, which is a cell in the body of this galaxy, which is a cell in the body of the universe, that we are part of something so much greater. And when we can plug in and connect to that much greater, life gets so much easier when we are in alignment with divine source, when we are receiving those divine downloads, when we are living from the sacred heart instead of the egoic head. So that's chapter 4 of part 2 is connect. And then the final chapter of the book is act, because the bottom line is, in order to sustain empathic mastery, in order to sustain a new way of living our life, we must act in new ways. We must be impeccable with our word. We must be mindful of all of our actions. And that means not just giving away our energy. That means not just probing somebody psychically because we can, not just jumping in and rushing into rescue without consent. So there's a lot of stuff about how do we live our life ethically, impeccably, consciously, deliberately, and with a spiritual pact that is about living, like really doing the right thing. So that's the book. And it is 380 pages. It is an absolute love letter. I wrote it for my 19-year-old self. I wrote it for the absolute train wreck, hot mess who was struggling mightily and did not have any answers. I wrote it for my future incarnation, so that I would find this book, hopefully in my late teens, early 20s, when I reincarnate next time, and I have this manual. So I literally wrote it for my future self, like another, like when I reincarnate. I wrote it for my former self. And I also wrote it for a number of different people one woman in particular who did not have the ability to stay on this planet because the empathic overwhelm was so bad. She just could not cope. And it was showing up as incredible amounts of physical pain in her body. And I also wrote it for another woman who did choose to stay and is thriving now because she chose to stick around. So that's the book. And so talking about the process, you ask how long it took. Spirit started telling me about this book and that it needed to exist. Probably, like, I was having some conversations with people, maybe even as early as 2014, where I was having clients that were coming in, and I kept on noticing. And at that point in time, I was actually doing tattooing as a healing art. And I kept on noticing that all of these people that I was talking to, the common denominator was that they were highly sensitive, empathic people who were picking up other people's stuff. And that a lot of the anxiety, a lot of the fear, a lot of the stress they were under wasn't necessarily theirs. So I started getting this idea that I needed to write a book called The Care and Feeding. This was the working title, was The Care and Feeding of Your Psychic Self When Living in a Muggle World. And so that was the working title originally. And then when I started to realize the distinction between what it means to be psychic versus what it means to be an empath, that's when I was like, oh no, this book is basically a book by an empath for other empaths. So I started playing with the ideas back in 2014 and letting it percolate for a while. But then it was 2016 when I started to do some stuff. First, I started doing some crowdsourcing where I had this post go viral on my Facebook page back when it was still possible for things to easily go viral.
All right, before the algorithms.
And I was getting, and so what I was doing was I was asking people questions. What are you struggling with? And they were writing back what they were struggling with and sharing with me what was going on. And so as I started getting their information, what they were struggling with, I started taking their questions and their struggles, and I started talking about the solutions based on the information I had. So from that, I then taught a 3-day retreat with a group of very special people who are all empaths, who are all people I absolutely love. And I basically taught this program. I took that, I recorded the entire thing. I took that and I took all of the audio. And at that point in time, the AI wasn't as good at ripping audio into transcriptions. So I actually farmed it out to a transcriptionist. And I basically had all of the content transcribed. Then what I did is from that, I created an outline and I redid the course and I dripped it as a more codified course. And I taught it over the course of, like a series of I think it was like a 10, 11 week course, right, which is now what is the Empathic Mastery Academy. Like that was the first iteration of that. So all of that had to happen. Like I had to speak it and bring it out into the world before it was going to get onto paper. So from that, I had a lot of transcriptions, and being somebody with, I come from a family of people with dyslexia, and I also come from a family with a bunch of ADHD. So I had to find ways to hack myself. I had to find ways to get myself to do it. So what I did was I handed the transcripts. I sussed out, with the help of a writing mentor coach, we sussed out the outline and we got the outline figured out. And then from that, what I did was I handed it back to one of my editors, my friend Nikki, who's an amazing content editor. And what Nikki did was she took that and she looked for the pieces that fit into the outline, and she took the pieces and she just didn't write anything. She just moved parts around and she rearranged the content so that it fit into the outline. And then she kicked that back at me. And then I had to get my butt into the seat and I had to sit my butt down and I had to write. And I will say that for any writer, I think that is probably the hardest thing, is just getting out of the play and games, getting out of the, oh my God, I could watch that other episode on Netflix, getting out of the rabbit hole that YouTube can take you down, and instead just sitting your butt in the chair and writing. Now, for me, I do better writing in longer bursts of time, like setting aside an afternoon of time where I can really dive in, because it takes my brain about a half hour to entrain enough so that I can actually read, so I can actually focus. So doing those little micro bursts of writing that some people can do does not work very well for me at all. Right. I know I need a little bit more time before I can do that. So what I did was I blocked out time in my calendar. And then what I would do is I would go onto Facebook. And like I said, I've got a lot of people who are mentors, as well as people who are my team of allies and accountability partners. So I would go on Facebook at the beginning of a writing sesh and I would write a Facebook post and I would tag my accountability partner. I would tag my launch manager, like writing, one of my writing mentors. Actually, I would tag like multiple writing, like my editors, my launch mentor, my accountability partner, so that everybody knew that that's what I was going to be doing for the afternoon. And I would basically say, if you hear from me, call me out because
Right.
I'm supposed to be writing right now. And so that process, like that didn't happen until, like I was working on sort of zhuzhing it, but that real process of going back in and really working on writing the book, like the book started to come into existence in June of 2016. That writing process of honing it, refining it, like working with it started in January of 2018 because I needed to let the process take the time that it did.
For sure. Yeah.
And instead of telling myself that I was a failure because I like let it percolate for pretty much the entire year of, like, I was leaving my brick and mortar business in 2017. I was in the process of making major life changes in 2017. I didn't have a lot of bandwidth left for writing a book. But in 2018, all of a sudden had left my job, my business that I had been running for 18 years as a tattooer doing healing art. And the new building that I was going to be working with, my studio, was not yet finished. So I had this like window of time of like 4 months where I did not have I had enough money saved that I was able to continue to focus on getting things done. And I still had clients. So I was working with clients and getting paid by them too, not tattoo clients, but healing clients. And so I had just enough to keep that all my needs were getting met, and I could devote large chunks of time, usually like Saturdays. Like I would just dive in and write on Saturdays.
Yeah, just get in the zone.
Get it in the zone and just do it. And so once that version was done, then I kicked it back over to my copy editor, who is my dear friend Amy, who has been reading my writing and has been working with me and editing my writing for the last, we started doing this back in 1994. So Amy is one of my BFFs, and Amy knows my voice
Shout
better.
out, Amy.
Major shout out to Amy.
Yeah.
Amy knows my voice better than anybody except for me. Like Amy and Nikki, who is the other editor, They know my voice. I mean, I would say that Amy knows my voice and my writing voice better than my husband does. Like she knows my voice. And so I trust Amy. So Amy goes in and takes it. She removes all of the and so's, in my experiences, the that's and the those and the so's and the ands, because I often start everything with an and.
Yeah.
And she went in and she just takes a brutal scalpel to it. She cuts out all of the excess lettering and words. And especially, I have a way of, often when I'm writing, I do Yoda speak. And so it's really funny where does not make sense, this book I write. And so she goes into the Yoda speak and she takes it and she reconfigures it so it actually makes sense for people who are not don't understand Yoda speak. So she went back in. So she took it, she basically massaged it, she scalpeled it, she cleaned it up, she really worked with it. Then I went back in and gave it another sort of once over. Then it went back to getting proofread and getting attention from Nikki, who she did sort of the final proofreading grammar edit. And then it went to one more editing person, my friend Arlie, who's a spectacular writer, who is really good at looking at transitions and looking at the places where a piece of writing does not necessarily connect to the next piece of writing. And so she was the one who basically looked at the whole thing and then basically was like, we need a transition here, we need a transition here, we need to make a little bit more of an explanation or a little bit more clarification here. And so she kind of helped it to turn into something that was way more viable and way more usable.
It's like a writing team. That's
It was
beautiful.
a writing team.
Yeah.
And I will say, anybody who thinks that you can write a bestseller and especially an award-winning book with, 5-star award-winning book on your own, you're on crack.
Nah, it's
You
team effort.
absolutely
For sure.
need a team.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, like, who was it? Was it Allen Ginsberg who said, kill your darlings? It's like we are so inclined to hold on to all the extra words, all the extra chapters, all the extra stuff because we love it. And the thing is, you got to kill your darlings. You got to kill your darlings. And that's where I'm like, here, take the scalpel. Here, go take the machete. Kill it.
For sure. That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, you're so welcome. And, giving myself, the other thing I will say is that I have had to be really patient with the journey and with the process, especially for the first book, because the thing they don't necessarily tell you when you're going to go write your first book is that all of your visibility issues are going to be in your face. And all of your stuff about being worthy of being heard, about the trolls coming out, if you have any witch wound stuff, and if you have any past life memories about being persecuted for speaking the truth and for being somebody who stood up, which I'm imagining a lot of your audiences can relate to this.
Right.
The thing is that when you start speaking the truth, when you start writing that book, all that karma comes up to be addressed and healed. And so for me, that meant I had to really give myself a lot of grace and a lot of mercy and a lot of time, because I wasn't just working on a book. I was healing wounds that were like multiple lifetimes old, also ancestral legacy stuff. Like I had to move through that. And, in terms of the audiobook, like I wasn't able to get, like, it took me Empathic Mastery, the book came out in like, October 1st of 2019. I was finally able to launch the audiobook in early 2022 because, again, going through that process of getting my butt into the recording booth, getting those words out. And then if you've ever done any kind of recording an audiobook is not at all like doing a podcast or anything that's spontaneous. It has to be perfect. So I had an Amy, God bless her soul, went through and listened to the original audio files and listened for what I called wordos, which are basically like typos, but where you say the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
We had punch lists of like 100, and like I think the smallest chapter had maybe 75 and the largest one was like something like 250 like wordos that I had to go back in, roll back and repair. And the thing is, if you're doing that, you have to have your microphone levels perfect.
Oh yeah.
And you have to listen, you have to roll back and listen, and you have to be speaking with the same vocal intonation and in the same exact way as you did before to punch it in. Music. Yeah. And the thing is that you'll listen to some people's audiobooks where you're like, oh my God, it's so jarring, where somebody punched in a piece where they do an edit and you're like, that sounds totally different.
Yeah, it throws you off.
It really throws you off. And so recording an audiobook is an art form. I will say, next time I record an audiobook, I am hiring a virtual producer who's going to sit through the whole thing with me the entire time, because I tried to do the production side of it on my own and didn't do anything with production until post-production, when I sent it off to really high quality sound editors and then and sound mixers. But this time, the next book that I'm working on right now, which is a channeled book all about basically our evolution as a species and and our soul's evolution and the journey.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, it's gonna be I gotta say, it's juicy. I channeled the whole thing. I was at a writing retreat that Nikki was running last July, and I channeled the entire book over the course of 1 week. And I was high as a kite when I came out of there. Now it's in Nikki's hands right now, but it's coming back to me soon.
Yeah. Well, we are running out of time. What I want you to do, though, I want you to let everyone know, number one, where they can get your book. how they can get in contact with you and everything else you have going on, including your social handles and all that good stuff.
Okay, awesome. So I keep it really simple. Pretty much all the social handles are at Empathic Mastery, except for Twitter, because I left that cesspool because I was just like, oh, no, you didn't. Like when they started to the whole free speech thing and people started to behave very badly, I was like, no. So aside from that, my handle is Empathic Mastery, at Empathic Mastery on all the main socials. If you want to find me, you can go over and find me at empathicmastery.com, but I have a system. Empathicmasterybook.com will take you to all of my books. And so you can find links to buy this book in the US and in any other country where it is available, which is pretty much available in all branches of Amazon, as well as the brand spanking new Empathic Mastery Diary that just recently came out, and the multi-author books that I'm part of as well. So Empathic Mastery Book is where you can find all that. And then if you want to listen to my podcast, you can jump on over to empathicmasteryshow.com. So you see, I got a system.
I like
it's all
system.
Empathic Mastery, and then you just tack on a word at the end of it. And if you didn't guess, if you wanted to learn more about the Empathic Mastery Academy, that's empathicmasteryacademy.com. Yeah.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
Yeah. And that is the life lesson I've been working on this entire life. Maybe by the time I die, I will have learned how to simplify things, because as a Capricorn sun with Virgo rising, I can overcomplicate everything.
Everything, right?
Everything. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much. Like, you're such an amazing beacon of light for just everything you're doing. And I mean that wholeheartedly. Like,
RL, thank you so much.
Yeah.
It has been such a pleasure to be here with you. It definitely feels like an absolute divine appointment. Like you and I were just destined to have this conversation.
Yes, I believe so too.
I really love that you and I are like, I can just tell that we are definitely on the same kind of seeking path. So
for sure.
So glad we connected.
Yeah, everybody out there, make sure you get her book. I'm telling you, I'm going to get it myself, and I'm going to continue to promote it. The link is in the description if you're watching this on a replay. The audio, if you're listening on audio, make sure you check out the video version on our streaming platform, AKASHA FLIX. And other than that, we'll be back next week with another episode of Minds Like Minds. Peace, love, and light, everybody.